Hello and welcome to Gardening Australia. This week we've got all the inspiration, practical how-tos, tips and tricks you need to help make your garden grow. Time to get your hands into the good stuff. Here's what's in store.
I'm looking at how to combine edible and ornamental plants to maximise colour, diversity and pollination.
I'm visiting an iconic example of Tasmania's garden-to-plate culture.
What treats do you have for me?
Finding out how the team grow for both produce and beauty.
Jerry shows us how to grow a plant with an appetite.
They're very successful, and this one has had ants for lunch.
And I'm visiting a native nursery in North Fremantle that's become an institution for local gardeners.
Pamela Wallace is a self-taught roll-up-your-sleeves and get-to-work gardener. And with an eye for good design and beautiful plants, Pamela's created a haven among the gum trees on a couple of hectares in Dural, a semi-rural area in northwest Sydney.
Costa, so pleased to see you.
I let myself in.
Oh, how lovely.
Can't wait to look around.
Yeah, let's go and have a little look. I was amazed when I came to Dural. There's a fabulous gardening community here, and I belong to the Galston Garden Club. We share a lot of things, and, you know, so many of the plants I've got in the garden are from cuttings that I've got from the people there. But for me, I love sharing it with people that are enthusiastic gardeners because they're just into the same thing. If I didn't have any visitors, oh my gosh, I think I'd still come out because I just have to have it looking nice.
In less than a decade, Pamela has transformed this acreage into her own art gallery.
Mostly it was lawn, and it was very easy to see the potential that I could turn it into the type of garden that I wanted and put my stamp on it.
So are you wedded to a particular look?
I probably am wedded to a particular look. I call it structure and profusion. So I'm a very romantic gardener. So I don't like straight lines. I love curves and flowing sort of things. I'm mad on flowers, mad on colour, foliage. There's hardly a plant that I don't like. Everything's just done with my eye. I don't really put anything down on paper.
What incubated that?
Our mother was a very creative. She was a tailoress and gardener, cook. They all go together. My twin in New Zealand loves to garden as well, and we can be on the phone talking about our gardens and sending each other photos of our gardens, you know, 24/7. But I think our mother created the
She's responsible.
Oh, she's responsible for sure. She was a fantastic lady and very creative and a great gardener herself. And so we just grew up wanting to create beauty. Creating a vision of beauty, to me, is the most calming, therapeutic thing that you could possibly do.
So where is this little passageway taking us?
Well, this passageway is getting narrower as the months go by, and I can hardly get through here now. But it's full of roses. These are amazing, these carpet roses. They just flower non-stop.
Yeah.
And dahlias. And it changes all the time. But this is a fantastic Salvia Van Hootie that will flower literally all year round. Great tones of red, and so you can see I've used the burgundy foliage. Really, one of the parts of the garden that I probably do a bit more work in than others, but I love it.
Wow.
You know, it is lovely to create vistas in gardens, and that's why I put the ball garden in the distance there as a lovely feature that your eye is just drawn to that vista. The woodland garden was created using a method which was brought about by a lady called Esther Deans. Yeah. In the 70s, she was a huge icon who really believed that you could create gardens without disturbing the basic soil structure, but adding layers and layers. I use this no-dig gardening system because the soil here is heavy compacted clay, very hard to dig holes in. Everywhere I dig, and of course with so many massive gums sucking up the moisture and creating quite a solid ground. Honestly, it's a great way to establish gardens under gums because you just wet the newspaper and then you lay it down. And masses of mulch, anything that you can get your hands on, whether it's leaf litter, compost, manure, blood and bone, every stick, everything I cut down would all get laid on top of this newspaper. And once that garden settles, you leave it. I normally try to leave it. I'm very impatient because I want to plant things in it as fast as possible, but I try to leave it over winter. Then by spring I'm planting. And all of this garden here, I would say 80% of it has been grown from cuttings. So all of the irisine, they grow so easily. I can basically hedge those, pick up a clump and throw them and they'll take root. All the Plectranthus ground cover, again, all from cuttings. There's 3 varieties, there's a purple, pink and white, and they're just so easy in this climate. They love the subtropical climate. I hardly pull out a weed. It's more about keeping the lawn out of the garden. So if we edge constantly, it's pretty good. But in large spaces, you've got to use your stalwarts and the plants that you know are going to thrive in your climate. And it's all year round colour.
Where did the lake come into the picture?
I like the way you call it a lake, Costa, because it's really just a dam. It was probably the hardest area in the entire garden to create a garden around because the dam, I'm sure when it was created, was all compacted clay. Very, very hard. All of this, again, no-dig gardening.
What are some of the plants that you enjoy?
You can see in the distance the Musa enda, which is a fantastic subtropical plant. It quite likes that spot, I think, because, you know, you'll never grow it if you get frost, but being by the water, it's obviously enjoying that microclimate. And I found the things like the helichrysum, you could basically grow those anywhere. That is a terrific ground cover and weed suppressor. And the yellow Salvia madrensis is also a terrific and flowers for a long, long time. And these cordyline electric pinks, they always grow bigger here. I don't know what it is. Maybe because they know I love them so much. But it is really my favourite part of the garden. I like the informality. You get the texture, the colour, movement. It's all about making an interesting garden.
The fountain certainly creates a soundscape of its own.
I love the effect that the ripples on the water during the day, but I really did put it in there as an aerator.
Here's a little project for you. I reckon you could get some nice submerged plant life in to help with the water quality.
I think that's a very good idea and I'm going to do that. Thank you, Costa.
These trees are spectacular.
They're huge, aren't they?
Yeah.
I think they must just love this place so much because they are solid, very, very good quality gums. When we first came here, I looked at these gums and thought, my God, how on earth am I going to cope with all these gum trees? And I have a bit of a love-hate relationship because they do create a lot of work and in storms they are quite scary. However, they give such a sense of maturity to this garden that makes it look a lot older and a lot bigger than you'd imagine. They give a really beautiful ring of protection and microclimate in this garden, so the frost is not a problem. It's amazing what I've grown. I mean, I've literally gardened around every single gum. That's just through a lot of enriching your soil.
Persistence.
Oh, constant, yeah.
And the sheer look of these grey box.
Well, the bark actually changes through the seasons, and I've noticed sometimes after the rain at various times of the year, that's almost bright, sort of a tanny red. It looks like someone's just painted it with a paintbrush. It's really amazing. Also, having a borrowed vista of this fabulous turpentine forest here is just gorgeous. And think how wonderful it's just going to be there forever because it's protected. I created this garden because it was during the time my mother was very ill, and I couldn't go and visit her in COVID. And she passed 3 years ago, and I decided to create this garden in her memory. She was a wonderful gardener. So this rose actually is called Garden Friend, and one of the best hybrid teas that you could possibly get in Sydney. It just never gets black spot. It's extraordinarily healthy. It's a great hedging rose, and I really don't do much to it. If I probably did more to it, it'd be even better. I love the Keith Hammett dahlias. His dahlias don't need staking, and they are phenomenal, and you throw the seeds and they just come up everywhere. There's one over there. And they are the best bee-attracting plants. And I think my mother would have loved this garden because she loved this colour, you know. And
that's really,
so,
I love that memory association with plants and with gardens. And I mean, do you feel like when you sit on that bench, you know, you get a chance to think of her and she's around?
Well, yes, that's a lovely thought. But to be perfectly honest, I never get the chance to sit.
Where to from here?
Oh, Costa, I think basically now it's all about maintaining the garden and really looking after what I've got. It is so rewarding.
What is pyrethrum? When looking for a natural insecticide, pyrethrum is a common option. Pyrethrum is a now obsolete genus that included chrysanthemums and tanasetums, popular garden plants. The active insecticidal chemicals in these flowers are called pyrethrins, though many commercial products use a synthetic equivalent. This Hoya has mealybug, and pyrethrum will kill this pest on contact. It also breaks down quickly in the environment. But don't go blanket spraying your garden, as it will kill all insects, including beneficials. Instead, aim directly at the pest and use it sparingly.
Can I recommend a Banksia for Brisbane? Well, look no further. This is my baby. It's a Wallam Banksia, Banksia emula. It's 20 years old and it's been growing here in full sun. It loves the heat and humidity, and this rain is going to produce loads of new growth and new flowers. It's a signature plant for a threatened plant community, Wallam Heathland, and it loves Brisbane. There's one thing I've learnt about this. While it does love our climate and it performs beautifully, it doesn't like drought. So during really long extended droughts, I give it a good drink once every week. And if you want the full deal, give it a dose of iron chelates in spring and autumn. It'll blossom well. And otherwise, what a beauty.
When's the best time to plant tube stock? Well, it varies on your climate and, of course, what you're planting, but the general advice is autumn, when there's more water around to help them establish and the soil still contains some residual warmth. Now, try not to plant in summer or in dry periods to reduce the amount of irrigation required, and so too the coldest parts of the year when the plants avoid growth.
Flowers, food, foliage. Are you the type of person that loves to have it all in the garden? I mean, why should you have to choose? More is more, that's what I say. Well, Sophie's here to show us that we can have our cake and eat it too.
Often our gardens are split into sections, separating ornamental plants from edibles. And while there's no problem with structuring a garden that way, in smaller gardens where there are limited possibilities for perfect microclimates, growing more collaboratively maximises space, beauty and pollinators. For example, if you have one full sun corner, you might want to grow both colourful flowers and fruit, or natives and vegetables. You can have both. As with all garden planning, it starts with getting to know your plants and choosing varieties that have similar growing conditions to live together. Plenty of edibles are ornamental too, with attractive floral foliage features. Take these trailing herbs. We've got prostrate rosemary, oregano and thymes. Now these look fabulous spilling out of a pot or hanging down a rockery, and they have beautiful foliage which is aromatic and pretty flowers. And then there's silver beet. While the common silver beet has green leaves and white stems, The rainbow variety of silver beet, sometimes called chard, has fabulously coloured foliage and stems and can be scattered through a bed. Annual veggies and annual ornamentals often have very similar growing requirements. They're quick growing, they like a lot of food, and they make a big show at a certain season. Try combining low ornamentals like violas, alyssum or marigolds with your veggies. They won't take up much space. If you want something a bit taller, try cornflowers, snapdragons or paper daisies for a show-stopping display. Now, planting these flowers first will actually create a home for predatory and pollinating insects, and you can do successional planting just like you would do with veggies so that you've got a display all year round. Native plants are usually separated from edibles, and with good reason, because members of the Proteaceae family, they're sensitive to phosphorus, which is in general purpose fertilisers. However, there are many wildflowers that can grow well between native food plants. So here I've got rosella, bush tomato and muntries, and you could be planting yellow buttons, billy buttons and native violet between them to fill in the gaps. Scatter chives and spring onions wherever you've got space and sunlight. They don't take up much room and they're easy to identify amongst drifts of other plants. The great thing about these too is being alliums, they produce umbel-shaped flowers which stand up high above the foliage, look really pretty and attract beneficial bugs. Blueberries are long-lived plants, but they prefer acid soil, so they combine really well with plants like camellias and azaleas. Perennial plants such as strawberries like a balanced fertiliser, but they also like a bit of a boost of potash, which makes them flower and fruit really well. So if you're feeding them, why not combine it with another ornamental plant that likes that sort of feeding too, like daisies or roses? This is a rose called Aussie Magic. It gets to about 60 centimetres high by the same wide, and I can combine it in this pot with 3 strawberries, which are going to hang over the edge and fruit. Basically, get creative and start thinking outside of the boxes of edibles and ornamentals to cultivate the perfect patch to suit your space and needs.
While gardening is considered a calming and gentle pastime, it's not without risk if you're not paying attention. Eye injuries are all too common, either from sharp or spiny material causing physical damage, or things like sap, pollen, or flecks of dust, mulch and grit getting in your eyes and causing irritation and then infection, which is why, when not on camera, I always wear good quality sunglasses as my first line of eye defence. If I'm doing something that's a little more heavy duty in terms of requiring eye protection, activities like pruning prickly shrubs or things overhead, using power tools or laying out mulch, safety glasses with wraparound protection are a must.
Gardeners know that some of the best quality ingredients are often the things you've grown yourself. It's something we have in common with many of the country's best chefs and restaurants. Hannah is checking out one of Tassie's finest kitchen gardens and uncovering some serious veggie patch goals.
I'm 40 minutes north of Hobart in New Norfolk, home to a stunning market garden that's quite literally dripping with fresh produce. It's an acre of neat veggie beds, fruit trees, orchards, flowers, packed greenhouses, and there's even a pond. All encased within these huge concrete walls. And the man behind these bountiful gardens is Rodney Dunn. Rodney, tell me about the history of this unique site.
Yes, it is an incredibly unique site. The first mental asylum in the Southern Hemisphere and the longest running. The area we're standing in now is the old exercise yard for the ward behind me, which was a prison ward for men. And we've got just over an acre in space here with these wonderful thick walls.
Rodney may be a familiar face to some of our Gardening Australia viewers.
Farm and cooking school of one of Tasmania's top chefs, Rodney Dunn.
I would describe myself as primarily a cook, but a cook who's curious about where my ingredients come from.
After running his 2 businesses from his home and farm, the opportunity arose to lease one incredible space for his restaurant and cooking school and to create the kitchen garden of his dreams. What inspired the move to come down to this property?
The opportunity existed, and to bring everything under one roof, to move it out of our home and to create what it is today.
So you've got the restaurant, the cooking school.
Yeah, and the centre to it all is this garden.
The garden. It's
Yes.
all based in the garden.
Of course.
What's your philosophy for this whole venture?
Well, it's to give the customers amazing inspiration. I like to be inspired, and therefore I like to pass that on, but also to the experience to eat the best possible fruit and vegetables they can ever eat.
Garden works began in 2021, and by 2023, they were pumping out all the produce Rodney needed. Now, you've got an incredible team of staff here, and Mitch in particular was instrumental in kickstarting this garden.
Mitch is like me, but in the garden, and to have someone with his passion and his vision, we see eye to eye on everything, just means that I can entrust this space to him and know that it's exactly what I would have done if I was doing it myself.
Mitch, what was your vision for the garden?
Well, the garden, first and foremost, is a production space, so it's to provide veggies and flowers and fruits, but the underlying vision was as a working example of a regenerative growing space.
Now, you and Rodney were both chefs before this. Has that made a difference in how you've planned or work with the garden?
Well, it does, because I guess, you know, chefs love food, so you're inspired. I think that dictates the deciding of the crops we grow and the style that we grow them, and then also, I guess, attention to detail carries through a lot, I think, from the kitchen into the garden.
There's 3 of us in total, myself, Otto and Josh.
What are you growing in the garden at the moment, Josh?
Well, we've got a very diverse selection of vegetables, fruits and herbs. An incredible berry orchard too. That's very, very productive. And really, we're just spoilt for choice here. It's incredible.
Let's go have a closer look.
Yeah, that sounds good.
The garden is divided into over a dozen zones.
So we wanted a diverse range of ornamentals for all the cut flowers for the restaurant, so natives and exotics, and lots of perennials and annuals, stone fruit to take advantage of the warm space in here, and then lots of different heirloom veg.
And what's happening up here, Josh?
Towering above the marigolds, we've actually got some beautiful heirloom tomato varieties here.
So many different types. The colours are just really pop, don't they?
Yeah, we've got about 16 different tomato varieties.
That's gorgeous.
Pretty impressive, yeah.
Yeah, and what's all happening on this side, Mitch?
We've just come past our sort of legume block, which is now in our summer beans, and now it's sort of morphing into our autumn crops. So we've just started planting our brassicas. Here is our cucurbit block, so we've got outdoor cucumbers, zucchinis.
And I imagine these massive concrete walls create a bit of a microclimate.
Functionally, the walls are radiating all of this heat, they're deflecting all of this light, acting as a bit of a windbreak, you know, and keeping out those wallabies and those possums and rabbits. So very, very great.
That's probably the big one.
That's the winner.
And I also hear you've got some more tropical plants that you're growing in your greenhouse.
Yeah, we do. All the crops that we can't grow outside, we've snuck into our little tropical space.
I'm going to have to see those.
Oh, let's go.
Okay.
Hannah, in here we have a diverse selection of tropical plants.
Ah,
Things
gorgeous.
that, plants that you don't typically associate with Tasmania.
Bananas.
Bananas, of course.
There's also curry leaf, macadamia, turmeric, finger limes, and of course, more tomatoes.
Hello, fellas.
Hello, Rod.
Hello, Rod. What treats do you have for me?
We have a
how does it feel to have such an incredibly abundant market garden literally at the kitchen doorstep?
We're incredibly spoiled as chefs, and I often say it's like an artist with a palette of paint. The more colours you've got, the more vegetables you've got, the richer your plate can be.
You've actually got quite a lot of flowers happening as well.
Flowers were never really part of my initial garden, and we needed to decorate that beautiful restaurant space and bring some of that garden in for people to look at. And so the natural step was to grow some of our own flowers, and that just enables us to be able to attract insects into the garden. So is that wonderful double benefit. But I've really fallen in love with flowers and really learned to appreciate them.
Everyone here agrees that the most important part of the garden is the compost. Imagine you get quite a lot of resources between the garden and the restaurant for all this amazing compost creation.
We do, and really this is kind of the core of the garden. You know, it's cliche to say, but we say the cooking starts in the garden. And if it starts anywhere, it starts with the compost. And so I think we calculated about 12 tonnes of food waste a year we get coming through the kitchen. And so we collect all of that, from paper to bones and shells and meat scraps. We separate out a few items, and then that's what goes into this composting system here.
And does that include meats, oils, all the things?
Everything.
Everything.
Everything?
Yeah.
So Josh, what do you do with all the bones coming out of the restaurant?
So we actually use the wood fire oven here on site to create this environment where we turn these bones essentially into charcoal, otherwise known as biochar.
We shred all of that, mix it in a cement mixer with sawdust that's been used as stable bedding, that's our carbon, and then we add our inoculant, and then it all goes into a green wheelie bin where it'll sit and ferment, and then it's turned into the big bay behind us here.
And how long does this whole process take?
It takes about a year. We're looking for at least a year of sort of curing, because we find after that year we're getting this big explosion of biology, and it seems to be at its most diverse. And really that's what we're trying to get into the garden space. So diverting the 12 tonnes of food waste has been great, but then through that process now we don't actually have to import any fertilisers into the garden.
So you don't buy any compost in at all?
No.
Both Josh and I talk about how lucky we are, and we feel very privileged to have the job that we do. I think really getting to work with a lot of inspiring people, working in a beautiful space, outdoors, and I think just working together towards something bigger with lots of people.
Jane, you're obviously many people's gardening heroes, including ours, but I'm sure there's some skeletons in the closet. Tell me, is there a really precious plant that you've actually killed?
Well, we could all say many, but the one I bought my mum and dad, a 50th wedding anniversary rose, golden celebration. When they moved from Mildura down to Melbourne, I bought it with, and it died. Oh, anyway, you have to move on, don't you?
Yes.
Have you got anything?
Oh, yes. Mine hurts too. It was a variegated monstera, kind of just before the hype, but still, it was expensive. Overwatered. Even I tell people, don't, but hey, don't, you know what?
You can't fret about it.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to bring it up.
Yes, it is, yes.
I've lost count of how many things I've killed or how much money I've spent on plants that I don't even ever pot up.
Yeah.
But I think my worst, and I still carry it with me, was actually killing a plant of a client. I pruned it too hard. It was an old peach tree. And I'd done that before with other trees, but it was just a different location, different soil, salt winds, and it never really came back. I learned a big lesson.
Were the clients happy or not?
They were very forgiving and kind people, but look, we all kill plants. If you're not killing plants, you're not gardening.
It's a learning experience.
Still to come on Gardening Australia, Josh checks out a native plant institution in WA. Clarence shows us how to cover a lot of ground, with natives, of course. And we meet an inspiring gardener who looks at her garden a little differently.
Nepenthes, or pitcher plants, are like nothing else. These are tropical carnivorous plants. Most of them come from Southeast Asia. The one thing they have in common are these traps which they use to catch and digest their prey. There are huge variations on this theme, but they're very successful. And this one has had ants for lunch. They come in all shapes, sizes and colours, and they delight beginners and collectors alike. And the pictures they use to drown and digest their prey are as beautiful and intricate as they are morbid. They're pretty easy to grow, but in a cooler climate, they're best grown indoors. In the tropics and subtropics, they're easily grown outdoors, but there are a few quirks to growing them successfully. The first thing to do is to pick the right sort. There's over 150 species of Nepenthes, but your best bet is a hybrid variety. These have been bred specially for their resilience and vigorous growth, meaning it's no problem to grow them without the aid of a greenhouse. The hybrids know how to grow fast. The key thing to growing Nepenthes successfully is not to use regular potting mix. You see, in the wild, they grow in hollows in trees or fissures in rocks, and in both places, they're packed with organic matter, but they're freely draining. So the medium you grow them in has to mimic what they experience in the wild. This is a pre-made mix, and it contains composted bark, chunky perlite, and chunks of coir. You don't use granular coir for these plants. Now at home, I use equal parts of all three things. And both this mix and my own mix work really well for a wide range of epiphytes, including Nepenthes. They're moisture retentive, and yet they're full of air pockets, which is perfect. Keep the mix wet but not submerged, and your Nepenthes will thrive. Fertilise twice a year using a slow-release fertiliser for orchids, once in spring and once in summer for maximum growth. Nepenthes have a habit of climbing or scrambling through other plants, and they'll hold on to them with tendrils. So the best way to position them is against the lattice or like this, in a hanging basket, but give them plenty of space. Nepenthes can be thirsty plants. When I grew them, I used to stand them in troughs of water. But look at this bird bath. It may be a little bit too deep, but you can stand a plant on a tile and it can drink all it wants. Plus, the shape is like a hanging basket, so it can grow down all over. This is a perfect way to grow and display Nepenthes. There's some mixed information out there about how much sun these plants can take. But remember, some of these will grow on cliff faces, and so when the clouds part, they're exposed to full UV. And the hybrids can be quite sun tolerant. So in my experience, a north-facing position where they can get up to 4 hours sunshine a day can bring out the best in these plants. That's it. Enjoy these unique plants at your place.
Climbing plants can be some of the most beautiful and useful in the garden, but you've got to choose carefully because the wrong climbing plant can quickly get out of hand. They can be a monster to maintain. So I have a few tips for choosing well. The first one is ask yourself what job you want that plant to do. Do you want it to provide a huge amount of shade, or does it just need to grow up and cover a fence? If so, don't choose a giant plant. Or better still, you can even espalier a shrub, it'll do the same job, and once it gets to that height, it won't need loads of maintenance. The second thing is, when you've got your climbing plant, you need to think about how you're going to support it. Some are happy on a light wire or even a few bits of string, while others need some serious framework behind them. And the third thing is, when you put your climber in the ground, you need to train it from the start. The last thing you want is all of the growth at the top. Let it go horizontally, train it along that frame, and you'll get much better coverage in the long run. But the most important thing is to choose your climbing plants carefully, because they are for life.
If you're lucky enough to have a local native plant nursery, you'll know just how valuable it is. It's not just about the plants on offer. It's also a community group, a place where people can pool resources and connect and share a common love of plants and the environment. Josh has found one in Perth that's a bona fide local legend.
Like us gardeners, nurseries and garden centres are a broad church. We all have our favourites that suit our needs and the way we garden. Some are conveniently located retailers of plants and garden supplies that are an easy in and out on a busy Saturday morning. Then again, some become part of the very fabric of a community because they offer something beyond the transactional.
The nursery is a place to be. It's the place that connects humanity and nature. So the more down-to-earth a nursery can be, the more choices it can have, the more spaces it can give people, more people will come. And the longer a nursery's been there, it evolves.
I began gardening as a kid not far from here in the 1980s, about the same time that this nursery was getting established on the banks of the Swan River in North Fremantle. For a lot of us in these surrounding suburbs, this place has been a key part of our gardening journey, but for reasons that are as individual as each of us are. Joanna Hayter heads up the team at a Pace Nursery and is in no doubt about what this place has come to mean to the local community.
The vision that we have here is for a greener planet and a more connected world. We've always been about that, trying to advance environmental sustainability, but also amplify social cohesion. Even within our own sort of workforce, a lot of those people are volunteers, and many of those volunteers are people with real diversity of abilities. A Pace started with a very small group of local residents and researchers, like-minded in love for plants, but also a deeper concern about ecology. So that was in the early 80s. So she's in her mid-40s now. She's ageing beautifully, gracefully, with dignity. But yeah, it really was literally driven by the people of North Fremantle. We propagate the native plants of the Swan Coastal Plain and the Darling Scarp. And that's everything from the seed collection of the provenance of this land right through to the propagation and revegetation services that go with that.
Who are you servicing? Who are your main clients?
It is really diverse. The whole thing of teach me, I know I need something and I want it to be native, yeah? Right through to much more long-term and complex commercial arrangements, I guess, where we have a massive propagation for plant subsidy schemes once a year. We're working with 14 local councils at the moment. Those that are the nearest, the City of Freo, the City of Coburn, buy plants from us to be able to subsidise and distribute to the ratepayers of those suburbs, which is brilliant, and also to other sort of environmental groups as well.
So it's almost like the seed knows more than what we do.
While the retail of local plants continues to grow, as more Perth gardeners become aware of the benefits of using native species, this is still a relatively modest portion of the nursery's output. How many plants do you and the team produce each year?
We produce close to 600 to 650,000 plants, Josh.
Really?
Yeah.
Across how many species?
You're looking at around 300 plus. About 85% of that goes back into land care or into re-veg, and about 15% goes out through the retail section. If you're here from the beginning of crop season, and then you're here at the very end when the plants are going out the door, it's quite a special feeling when you look at a label and you see your initial on the back, and you know that you've been there from seed to sowing to care to a healthy plant that is then going out the door. I love plants.
Look, I'm going to ask a really hard question and something that you really shouldn't put to a nursery manager.
Yeah, OK. Oh, geez.
if you had to pick a few favourites amongst all of this...
Yes, yeah.
What would they be?
I have to include a Banksia because we are in Perth and we are the only city in the world surrounded by a Banksia woodland, and it's a beautiful little Banksia menziesii.
Nice.
Yeah. You can get them in dwarf form or fully grown. They're incredible for habitat as a cut flower. They're beautiful.
Well, you've sold me on that one, so yes.
Yes, props to Banksia menziesii.
Well done.
Another one of my favourites would have to be Leptocarpus. This is Leptocarpus decipiens. There's a few different ones around. It's a bit hard to see, but it has the most striking little burgundy sheaths on the side of them. You would find this in freshwater regions, not so much saline salty water. But rushes are fantastic for habitat. Frogs, think about our little marsupials. It makes a wonderful cut flower as well, which is great, and they look really aesthetically. The third plant that I have selected, it's mostly, I feel like casuarinas or allocasuarinas are often overlooked.
They are.
And the location of Apace, we're right here, we're nestled on Derbil Yerrigan, Swan River, and what lines the river is these beautiful Casuarina obeses. We don't realise, but we'll meet and gather there by the river, and often what we're standing under is a Casuarina obesa. So they're a spectacular plant, again, very good for endemic biodiversity, habitat, shade. I think it is a wonderful tree, yeah.
Mate, I reckon you've picked 3 rippers, and for great reasons. Well done.
Woohoo! Yes.
It's a very broad, diverse atmosphere and workplace, really. Not because it's the right thing to do, although it is, it's also the fun thing to do. For example, we pay our staff to come to morning tea. Why do we do that? Well, because about half of our workforce are also volunteers. It's a very deliberate point of saying morning tea is really important. That's where we tell stories. Only rule is not allowed to talk work, and we hang out.
How does the community garden fit into the bigger picture?
It's just part of the picture of what we are. You know, it is a place for all. I think, for me, the heart in that garden is very important.
The beauty of life, that you plant something and grows and you produce something that it wasn't there before, is magic. Lately, I changed a little the design in the sense that I lost my husband and I'm only one, taking care of the plot. It's a social activity with other gardeners, and you become a big family. And I just love it. It's creativity as well.
Clearly, planting endemic native species is really good for this planet. And so we want to be part of not just the education and ability to help people to admire and love, you know, these plants. It's also that community and connection space as well. Joining other people in campaigns, standing by people that are doing good work in terms of protecting or maintaining land or flora or fauna or reefs or oceans, or this is all part of who we are. It's a philosophy that says we care about the planet. Greener planet, connected world.
Some ground covers are better than others at keeping out weeds. The best are those that can form a thick mat, and also they have a bit of oomph about them. They'll outlast and vigorously compete with any weeds that might try to take hold. When planting in plenty of sun, Canadia is a very pretty trailing ground cover, but I do find it's a little bit too open to stop weeds from coming through. Whereas Myoporum parvifolium can create a dense cover in a short amount of time. Also, in full sun, you could try low-growing grevilleas and go for the dense forms where there's layers of overlapping branches and leaves. Things get a bit tricky in shady areas. This is a fantastic ground cover. These are prostrate forms of Gardenia ovata, and whilst it'll grow in sunshine, they're also happy in semi-shaded positions and can handle full shade. The thing with shade is that any native ground cover is probably going to be slower at growing than any shade-adapted weeds they're supposed to be competing with. But never give up. If you plant at closer spacing than you would if you were planting in full sun, that'll help to create a dense mat sooner. And also, in the interim, remain vigilant. Pull out any weed seedlings, and then, once established, in the shady area, Gardenia is as good as gold at keeping out the weeds. Whether you're growing in sun or shade, if weeds are a constant problem, try to lessen their impact through things like sheet mulching with cardboard and a layer of good quality mulch to give new plants a head start getting established.
our My Garden Path segment this week, we meet a passionate grower and cultivator. From her roots as an environmental scientist to an advocate for her community, her family garden in Lismore has inspired it all.
So this is my front yard. There's so many random things planted here. We also have our chickens in this part of the garden. And I've learned that you've got to plant plenty of things so there's enough to share between us and the chickens. I plant closely together so that the chickens avoid that particular area. And I feel like we've achieved a really good balance so that it's my garden, but it's also a space that the chickens can enjoy as well. My name is Sigrid. This is my sign name. My sign name is a little bit random. It was given to me by my brother, who gave me like a nickname, Doo-doo, Doo-doo. And so that kind of stuck. That's the sign for Doo-doo. Yeah, I get so easily lost in the details in this garden. I'm also a very sensory type of person, so I love to feel things. I like to look at things closely and just imagine. When I was younger, I always imagined myself as incredibly small and what the world would look like from that perspective. So moss has always given me kind of like an escape. I can shrink myself and shrink my thoughts even. When I look in the garden, I love seeing that the moss is there and being able to just run my hands over it is so lovely. And I feel so happy from it. And it also shows just how healthy the system is here. So I use Auslan, Australian Sign Language. AUSLAN is spelled, the abbreviation of Australian Sign Language. I was born deaf. My family did notice that I wasn't responsive to sound, and my father was working out in the backyard. He's a builder. He was using power tools, and I was asleep, peacefully asleep. And at the same time, my grandfather said, I don't think Sigrid's hearing this. So I was tested and diagnosed at 9 months of age. My family, my parents, my grandparents, on both sides of the family, so all 4 grandparents and my parents, would then go to TAFE and they learned Auslan. They actually learned signed English, at that time, and they straight away fed that back to me and I was able to communicate with them. But they also introduced me to the deaf community, which meant that I was able to pick up Auslan as well. So I had access to language straight away. Most deaf people are born to a hearing family, and they do face barriers. Access to language deprivation is a huge issue. I felt so lucky to have been born in this area because I had access to the deaf community, which is actually incredibly rare outside of capital cities. Yeah, I've been gardening since I was young. Because it's something that my family has done on both sides of my family for some time, we've always had gardens, different styles of gardens, but I've learnt a lot from both sides of my family. My mother's father, my grandfather, he's always been a gardener. Most of the plants that I have here are from my grandfather or from friends and family. And when I walk around, I feel like just such a strong connection with different people. If I spot a plant I think of the person that gifted me that plant. It feels like a really, it's like I'm in good company with my garden. I'm never lonely. I feel like everything I give to the garden gives back to me. If the plant community only has one type of plant, it's not a strong community. There isn't the ability for it to be resilient. It's more vulnerable and can break down quickly. But if you have a diverse community within the plant realm, different animals, different types of plants, different types of bacteria and all of those types of things, that ends up being a stronger community, which will actually survive through time. And how everything is interconnected. It doesn't matter how small it is. If you can't see it, or if it's huge, everything is connected. Diversity is important. I feel like the deaf community is so similar to the mushroom and fungi family. I'm so connected to that. I love seeing the deaf community like the mycelium network. There's connections, though they're distant, they're strong. It's healthy. And when the conditions are perfect, the support is there, the access is there for the deaf community, then everyone pops up and you're able to see them. The community becomes more visible and aware of all of those things.
It's time to make those gardening dreams a reality. Here's your list of jobs for the weekend. In cool areas, native grasses like Poa lap can be cut back hard now, so they stay looking fresh and green. If you're drowning in zucchini, head into the kitchen to preserve the harvest. Knock up a jardinera by soaking in vinegar and salt overnight, then layering in sterilised jars with olive oil. Inspect your beehives. If you see honeycomb on the lid, it may be time to give them more room by adding a super. In warm temperate areas, it's passata making time. Break out the bottles and fire up the spreme pomodoro and you'll be tasting summer all year long. Set up some habitat for lizards so they can overwinter at your place. Large rocks, broken terracotta and corrugated iron are the current must-haves in reptile real estate. Agapanthus are about to start dropping seed everywhere, so thoroughly deadhead to stop them becoming a problem in your area. In the subtropics, if your banana is overloaded with fruit, prop bunches with bamboo poles, as heavyweight harvests can snap the entire plant. While you're at it, throw down some poultry manure. Bananas have an insatiable appetite and monthly feedings will keep the bunches coming. Macadamia harvest is just around the corner, but remember to apply mulch to keep the roots cool and ensure good fruit set. Fruiting now in tropical areas is the sea almond. The large woody stone inside the fruit can be cracked to reach the tasty kernel inside, a favourite snack in the Torres Strait. Cucumber can be grown from seed now. If you're short on room, try compact varieties like Space Master. If your mangoes finish fruiting, give it a good prune to remove upward growth and old flowering stems. Arid gardeners, if your crops are struggling in the hottest part of the year, roll out some shade cloth during the day to help get them through. Brussels sprouts must be planted now so they have enough time to mature in the colder weather. Flowering now is the desert fuchsia, or Eremophila macdonellii. This tidy shrub only gets to 1/2 metre tall and is covered in impressive purple flowers. Remember, if you've missed any episodes of Gardening Australia, you can catch up on iView anytime. Well, that's it for this week. But there is plenty left in the barrow to spread around for next time. Here's what's in store.
I'm finding out what it takes to produce this delicious and bitter crop that needs to grow not only once, but twice.
I'm visiting the home collection of the president of the Cactus and Succulent Society of Queensland, and I'm very excited.
And we meet someone living the country gardening dream.
It really, for me, is a beautiful celebration of colour and form and texture. For me, a small garden has got to work hard.